Fantasy basketball playoffs are here, and that means the Angle Dynasty League is currently in the first round of playoffs. How's it going, guys? My name is Andrew. Welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. As stated, we are here to discuss the Angle Dynasty League today. So generally, when we discuss this league, we cover 5 trades that have happened in this league. But since the time between the last video and this one is pretty short, we're only going to cover 2 trades today that have happened. We'll cover the last Blockbuster that took place prior to the trade deadline. We'll cover one more trade after that. And then we are going to take a look at how round 1 of our playoff matchups are going so far, and also just talk about the extremely tight race and battle for seeding that happened too. This is one of the closest leagues that I have ever been a part of. So before we get started, I want to bring in 2 people that are in this league with me. For starters, my fellow Angle analyst, Braxton, the owner of the New Zealand Breakers. How are you today, sir? You are the number 2 overall seed, aren't you?
Yeah, man, it's one of my favorite times of year. It doesn't get much better than this. I'm very excited to talk fantasy playoffs with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now making his first appearance on the Angle podcast, someone I've been playing Dynasty with for quite a few years now. The owner of Velez Sarsfield, right there with me in the top, as a top 10 seed. I believe you are an 8 seed. Adrian, how are you today, dude?
Doing all right. Also, looking forward to this. Brax, you said that this was one of your favorite times of the year. For me, this is one of the most stressful. So wake up in the middle of the night thinking about which waiver pickups to select and all that. So yeah, thanks for having me.
You are definitely right. It is a very, very stressful time of the year. I remember last year was so, like, playoffs in general were so stressful to me. And it's because I went really far in one league. And I just remember being so, like, checked out of basketball by the time it finished. I watched more playoff hockey than I've ever watched in my life last year following the fantasy playoffs. But I think things might be a little bit different this year. Playoff matchups are looking a lot better, and it doesn't seem like Boston's just going to steamroll through everybody again this year. So let's get started on a couple of trades that we're going to discuss today. First, starting off with our featured blockbuster of the episode. Here we are. This is our featured blockbuster trade for today. So we are starting off with our good friend from Sports Ethos, Mark C. His team, the Houston Comets. He is currently in playoffs, and in preparation for his playoffs run, shortly after the DeJounte Murray Achilles tear, he traded DeJounte Murray away, in addition to Isaiah Collier and a first-round pick. So previously in these trade videos, the final seeding was not done yet. So all we could really say was first-round pick, and then we can talk about, oh, this team's not doing too well right now. This might be a lottery pick, or this is a good team. This is a late pick. But we now know with the set seeding that this pick, which belonged to Colossus Rhodes, shout out to Kobe, is pick 16 overall in the 2025 draft. So that's Murray, Collier, and pick 16 in exchange for receiving Jalen Brunson from the Los Angeles Lakers. Shout out to Phil. So congrats, boys, on being our final blockbuster of this season. Brax, let's start it off with you. How do you feel about a trade like this one?
I think it's really interesting. I really thought Phil, as a tanking team, was going to hold on to Jalen Brunson through the deadline. What I do think he extracted some nice value here out of Brunson. Something that it does happen as a result is that it kind of reduces, in my opinion, his ability to kind of be that 1 year turnaround that I would like to see for tanking teams. 2 3 year long tanks are really not something that I think are terribly effective. Yeah, you can accumulate decent assets, but at that point, you've sunk the amount of time and money you've sunk in the league. I don't think outweighs the chance to be competitive at that point. But from Phil's side, I think it's pretty solid in terms of value. It just depends on how soon DeJounte can come back from that Achilles injury. And then on the Comet side, I understand why this move was made. I probably would have looked to move DeJounte by himself outright for more of a top 100 producer as opposed to packaging all these assets up into one. Just and this is just based on the team context that the Houston Comets have. It's a pretty shallow team to begin with, even before this trade. He's only 6 or 7 deep in terms of solid rotation players. Not to, throw any shade or anything, but, we're seeing the impact of that as he has players like Sabonis and Andrew Wiggins who have missed this first week of playoffs pretty much and we're seeing the ramifications of it. So I probably would have looked to move, like I said, DeJounte outright as opposed to, you know, packaging all these assets into one or moving that first round pick for a piece outright to get a little bit deeper. But overall, I don't think it's bad value.
Yeah, I think this trade's going to be very much in the eye of the beholder. I think a trade like this one, especially involving somebody who had a significant injury to a pretty tricky part of the body, there's going to be some sides who really like the depth value, especially in a 30 teamer. Like if we were talking about a 12 to 14 teamer, I would not like this as much. But in a 30 teamer, depth is so crucial. And that is going to be a pretty first round pick, too, a pretty good one. So with that tricky injury and also the star power of Jalen Brunson, I think opinions are going to shift pretty wildly on this one. So let's go over to Adrian, somebody who I know is very good at 1 year tank turnarounds. How do you feel about, potentially having to wait on DeJounte Murray next year for somebody like Phil's team who should be doing a 1 year turnaround since they got some older players like AD and Aaron Gordon and such?
Yeah, it's a good question. And before I get into it, I'll say I'm very heavily invested in this trade as I'm facing the Houston Comets in my first round playoff matchup right now. So would not have minded if this trade did not happen for my immediate purposes. But just looking at it like from an analytical perspective, DeJounte Murray plays pretty explosively. I think a lot of his value stems around his steals coming off an Achilles tear. I don't know if it will be just as effective as he has been in the past, but he's also, come back from some pretty significant injuries before. So I really like Collier, or is it Collier? I don't know how to pronounce it, but he, I think, has shown some great signs of being a prime asset over the next few years from what he's shown this rookie season. First round picks, always fun to have, and, great trade value there. At a glance, without looking too deeply at either of their teams and just looking at where they're at in the standings, I think it seems like a very much so like the classic win-win type of trade where you've got a competing team, unfortunate injury, trade for a different star. You got a tanking team taking the injured asset as well as some young pieces and picks as well. So I saw it as somewhat of a win-win. Brax, I do think you raise a good point of not wanting to lose too much depth if you're the Houston Comets, since they're pretty thin. So with the Sabonis injury, the Wiggins injury, I think that's going to be impactful. So we'll see how it ends up shaking out. If I'm able to get past the Comets, probably not worth it for Houston to have done this. I'd probably be pretty happy with my return if I were the Lakers, assuming DeJounte comes back pretty healthy.
And Adrian, to your point, with a lot of DeJounte's value being rooted in those steals as well as some of the counting stats, I mean, he was already kind of having a down year. His field goal percentage was under 40%. And a lot of these counting stats that he was racking up this year kind of were as a result of the Pelicans just being so injured, right? What was it? 17,
Right.
17 and a half points, 6.5 boards, 7.4 assists, and 2 steals. Those are fine, right? But who's to say he comes back to not even that level, but where he's been in years past? I think it's fair to say DeJounte, depending on what this team looks like, if he gets traded, if he gets put on a worse team, not that you can be much worse than the Pelicans are this year, right? But there's a lot of context that can or a lot of outside factors that can affect DeJounte Murray moving forward that could therefore decrease his value in addition to the Achilles tear. So kind of risky on that part as well.
And I think the biggest point in all of that, which is the most fair thing to say, is that the Spurs version of DeJounte Murray is probably gone. Mitch brought that up in the most recent video we did talking about where he moved within our dynasty ranks for us. And I do agree with him on that. But the overall science of Achilles tears have improved a ton in regards to recovery and the overall surgery that's done for it. I mean, there's plenty of countless examples of athletes who came back from Achilles tears, maybe most notably Kevin Durant, who's still playing to this day. And even a more recent example, the rookie for Denver, Deron Holmes, who tore his Achilles pretty much right before Summer League. He's already doing on-court work for Denver. So we're seeing that turnaround being a bit quicker. I don't think it's no longer like that year and a half. I think it's maybe closer to like what an ACL tear is, maybe a year, something around there. I really like Collier a lot. I think the Jazz got an absolute steal with that pick. I really like the assists and steals upside that he's going to provide for Phil's team. And for someone who's tanking, who he finished 29th overall, so he's going to be picking somewhere in the top 6 for sure, more than likely somewhere in the top 3. And then he's adding pick 16 to that. So that's a good overall return. And then in Mark's defense, I will say that Brunson is still young and he's under a very good cost-controlled contract for a type of league like this one, which involves real NBA salaries. So he's still a great piece to have moving forward. And I know personally from working with Mark on a few videos that he does prefer this type of top-heavy build. But just, for others who are thinking about what they want to do with their build, going top-heavy is fine. I have seen it pay off before. But, like you guys mentioned, we're seeing the trade-off of that with not having enough depth to make up for some key injuries that take place. And that's really just what happens in these head-to-head leagues. Injuries, scheduling, and just overall luck is a huge factor in playoffs. There's definitely no denying that. So that's going to take us to our next trade here. And Adrian, as our honored guest today, I wanted to cover one of the trades that you made. So you, Velez Sarsfield, made a trade with the Brisbane Bullets. You sent away Coby White in exchange for Keegan Murray. So just give us your thought process on that move.
Sure. Yeah, this one was, I think, a couple angles to it. If I'm not mistaken, Bullets owners NZ Bulls, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's a Bulls fan, noted by the name. I do think that somewhat played a factor in him wanting Coby White. If I remember correctly from my negotiations, he was also interested more so in getting Coby White's stat set, more focus on guard type of categories, and didn't necessarily have as much value for what Keegan provides. And I believe at the time was pretty guard heavy. So was looking to make a change. I also liked shedding a few million in cap to give me some more flexibility I think I ended up doing some other like minor moves as well after this, or maybe they didn't come to fruition. I don't remember. And so thought it was a good swap to make, and ended up moving forward with it. I'm also a big fan of not having players that are on like, not necessarily tanking, but let's say non-playoff teams heading into fantasy playoffs, because you start seeing a lot of them rest and such. And so Coby White gave me a little bit of nerves of him being on a team that's not doing well, and him potentially sitting a little bit more often during crunch time. I think the Kings are going to try to compete. So I was pretty happy with having Keegan come and replace Coby. The only thing I'll say is now I'm realizing I'm a little bit short on guards with FVV getting hurt. Keontae George, I think, was ill and wasn't playing for me tonight. So that one maybe came back to bite me a little bit. But overall, I think I'm still pretty happy with it.
Yeah, and you raise a good point about a very viable trade strategy that I see people focus on in both standard fantasy and in dynasty, which is number one, the move that you just talked about, which is trading away a player from a bad team, a team that's likely going to be incentivized to lose more games to improve their pick. And I definitely get that. It's something that I myself have done before. I've seen other people do it. It's, you don't want to deal with silly season on a particular player. And the Kings are still in this playoff race. They're definitely going to keep going, and Keegan Murray is going to play a lot. And I will also add, even though if you look at the 9-cat stat set on paper for the two of them, Coby is doing better right now, better overall, but Keegan is doing better of late. And another part of this strategy, something I see people do, I see Brax do it a good amount of time, is trading for players that have more favorable playoff schedules, in addition to trading away people that have a bad playoff schedule. So I kind of put those two things in the same boat, trading away guys that are probably going to be on a bad team that's going through silly season, and also trading away guys that have a bad playoff schedule for better ones. So how do you feel about the trade-off on this one, Brax?
Well, first, you mentioned the playoff schedule thing. It's definitely something that I'm kind of fighting with myself with every year, because you're kind of towing the line of, am I overthinking the playoff schedule? Am I trading a better player away? So I definitely wouldn't prioritize that in trades, just more in a general sense. But I use it more of as a tiebreaker, or as when making lower end moves. That's something that I heavily consider as well. This trade, personally, in these deeper leagues, I prefer more versatile skill sets. So Kobe White kind of edges out a little bit for me over Keegan Murray, whereas Keegan is probably a better 9 category guy in theory, with those low turnovers, high efficiency, 3-pointers, splash of blocks, whatever it is, right? The type of skill set that the 9 category rankings seem to love. But because Kobe can do a little bit of everything besides, blocks, and the rebounds aren't great either, right? But I just like having guys who can contribute in more of a wide array, because to me they have a little bit more of a higher perceived ceiling and a higher floor, right? Because if Keegan is not doing the points and rebounds thing on any given night, then he's not really doing anything, right? Where if with Kobe, maybe he hits 5 threes and has 1 assist, or maybe he has 9 assists and 1 3, right? So he's just got a little bit more flexibility there when it comes to the stats that he can provide. So that's kind of why I would prefer Kobe. But on a surface level, it's very fair, I guess, to sum it up. Although I probably would have preferred Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, with this trade too, there's way more good guards than there are good forwards, and it's a problem I've run into in this league specifically a lot, where I have too many guards and not enough viable forwards. So I do like that aspect of it for Adrian, getting a good competitive forward, and it's likely going to be pretty easy for him to find another good guard to slot in there eventually. I think the biggest trade-off that would make me lean towards the Kobe side is scoring, especially in a 30 team. That gap going from Keegan's 12 points per game to Kobe's 18 points per game is actually a pretty sizable jump. I know 6 points per game doesn't seem like a lot, but in a deep league context like this one, it absolutely is. And really good scorers can be hard to find, but also, like I said, really good forwards are pretty hard to find too. So yeah, it's a pretty even trade-off on both sides. So definitely hope that one works out for you, Adrian. I think Brisbane is in playoffs too, if I remember correctly. So he's got Kobe playing for him as well.
I think he's playing the number 1 seed. I think he's playing Blackwater Boston.
He is. That's right. He is. So he's got a big task ahead of him. But Blackwater is missing Victor Wembanyama though, so perhaps things will even out. But I know maybe Gorgeous Niang is gonna have some things to say about how that matchup plays out in favor potentially of Blackwater bossing. So that covers the 2 trades that we wanted to discuss today. And now what we're going to do is view the 16 teams that are locked into the playoffs for the Angle Dynasty League. We're going to take a look at some of the really close seeding battles that took place. And as of recording right now, it is Wednesday the 5th. It is 6:20 or I think 6:30 at night Pacific time. So we are cheating a little bit in that we are kind of seeing how these matchups are playing out so far. So we have a little bit of an idea of how these might go in regards to maybe some predictions that we're going to give. But it is still fairly early in the week. Things can definitely change. So it'll be fun to come back and revisit this one. But let's dive on into the league and take a look at how things are going right now. So before we dive into the overall playoff bracket to show you guys how the matchups are playing out currently, I wanted to show you really quickly how close the seeding race was. So for starters, obviously up in the top 5, things were pretty separated out. Blackwater Bossing had an amazing year, but in my opinion, I consider Braxton's team, the Breakers, to be the true 1 seed right now, just because.
Don't say that. Why would you say that? You're going to jinx me. That's crazy.
I, in my opinion, consider Braxton's team to actually probably be a first-round exit. And
thank you.
With that, Blackwater's got a tough task ahead of him, not having Victor Wembanyama, and he has the poison that is Jimmy Butler on his team. Just kidding, Worth. But anyways, what I wanted to show was, for starters, number 5 through number 8. Number 7 is me, and number 8 is Adrian. So as you can see here, especially from 6, 7, and 8, 6 and 7, Joy and I, Singapore and I have the same record basically. And Adrian was only half a game back from us. So that was a very close battle right there. I know I suffered a couple of losses in the last 2 weeks and dropped from 5th to 7th just in that short amount of time. And then if we look down at the bottom here, take a look at how close the race was to get into the final but the final 3 playoff spots. So the 15 and 16 seed both finished the same amount of games back from the 1 seed, and the 14 seed was only a half game back from there. So 14 Kanazawa, 15 Colossos, and 16 Brisbane both made, or all 3 made playoffs by the skin of their teeth. The Geelong Supercats missed the playoffs by 1 game, and the Toronto Raptors missed playoffs by 3 games. So very super close race that took place here. But what I want to also now take a look at is the playoff brackets, the current matchups that are taking place. So we're going to start from the top here and work our way down. The first matchup that's taking place is the number 1 seed versus the number 16 seed. So number 1 Blackwater Bossing versus the number 16 Brisbane Bullets. It is a very close matchup right now. It is at 4-4-1. So like I mentioned, Blackwater's dealing with a significant injury. Brisbane had some injuries of his own too. He did manage to skate into playoffs at the end here. I do recall seeing him maybe a couple spots back from playoffs a while ago. So Braxton, let's go to you first. How do you think this matchup between David and Goliath is going to play out?
A small correction. It's actually a 3-3-3 matchup right now instead of 4-4-1.
Oh, so it's just displaying it all weird. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it should be really tight. After Wembayama went down, it seemed like it was kind of just open to anybody in the field. Now, he does have Josh Giddey and Bull, who have been really some late season just not a resurgence, right? But just have really been excelling. Josh Giddey, I think, was number 2 over the past 2 weeks or something like that. And he's really doing a huge job carrying that team right now. So it'd be interesting to see if Blackwater Bossing can hold on in advance.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good matchup there. So I'm gonna skip over the next one because I'm going to talk about that after I have you go next, Adrian. So let's look at this Las Vegas Aces versus Beijing Ducks battle. So let's see. I know this is more towards the middle season. So this is number 4 Beijing versus number 13 Case. Case out to a pretty commanding lead so far, 6-3. Category-wise, I think the overall spread in those categories might be a little bit closer. But Adrian, just off the top of your head, who do you think is going to win this matchup here?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's funny because Case, in true fashion, pretty much riding or dying with his Rockets players. I believe he has Sengun, Jabari Smith, and Tari Eason. He's also got a pretty good roster outside of them as well, with Jaylen Brown, Keyshawn George, who's been one of my favorite rookies. So I think he's got a good shot of holding on to the lead. But when you look at the Ducks roster, I mean, Jokic, Dyson Daniels, Cat, I traded him Josh Hart earlier in the season, Trey Murphy as well. I don't know. It's kind of hard to go against the Ducks, and I don't just want to say that because of seeding, but just looking at that top talent. Just given it's just Wednesday. I haven't checked specifically, but I know Cat missed a game, and it's like certain teams are doing like the Tuesday, Thursday schedule, and they've only played once so far or something like that. I could easily see this one turn around in the Ducks' favor. So if I had to pick, I'd stick with the Ducks, just looking at their top talent.
Yeah, it has a good argument that they do have top talent. I did sneak a peek at how the matchup is going. Vegas is pulling away. He's got 4 categories that he's leading pretty strongly in, but again, there is a lot of time left in this week, so we're going to see how that one plays out. Adrian, I'm going to go ahead and talk about your matchup. So this is the Houston Comets versus Velez Sarsfield. So you are the 8th seed. I believe Houston was the 11th seed. I know, 9th seed. This is 8 versus 9. My apologies. So this one, like I mentioned in the previous matchup, unfortunately, Adrian is very much running away with this one. So unfortunately, Mark is dealing with some pretty significant injuries right now, and it is making things pretty tough to come back from. Adrian's got a pretty good lead in points, rebounds, assists, an amazing lead in both of the stocks categories too. So you're looking pretty set here to move on to the next round. And one thing I got to add is if you make it to round 2 in the way our league pay structure is set up, you at the very least get your money back from the season. So that's looking pretty good here for you to get your money back. All right, let's move on.
Thank you for it.
One thing I will say, Adrian, how do you feel about a potential round 2 matchup against Brisbane or Blackwater?
if I have the privilege of getting that far, I do think I have the luxury of being in that quarter bracket with one of the top seeds who's facing a significant injury. So I think just kind of a favorable bracket with Blackwater Boston losing Wemby. I don't know. I mean, I think Brax, you talked about that one earlier, right? Just very tight matchup. Could go either way, and just look forward to seeing what comes. But I feel like I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm just looking at who's playing tomorrow and trying to make sure that I can hold on to the lead that I've got so far.
All right, very good. So let's move on to this next one here. I'm going to have you talk about this one, Brax. We got the Chicago Bulls, who are the 12 seed, taking on the number 5 seed, Sport Lisboa Benfica. And there's a little bit of a potential upset alert going on right now with Chicago up 7-2 currently in the matchup. Brax, if you're taking a look at it, how some of these categories are playing out, how do you feel about how this matchup is going to go?
It's another one that's kind of a toss-up for me. I mean, Chicago is pulling away with assists, right? So you can kind of write that off. Although Sport Lisboa is not really, it seems to be in kind of a punt assists anyway. A complete, just an embarrassing showing from Paul George this week is not helping him. He's re-aggravated the groin injury again. And I would not be surprised if he's done for this week. Jeremy Grant is not giving him really anything either. So what he really needs to rely on here is the field goal percentage, and threes, points, and rebounds. The problem is he's down by like 24 threes at this point, so there's not gonna be any catching there. Field goal percentage, which he needs to win as a punt assist team, he's currently losing, and rebounds. He still does have Jalen Duren to play tonight, as well as a full game from MPJ. Possibly he pulls ahead, but he's going to need some serious. Some really big games from some of his impact players to take a lead after tonight. And I think maybe after tonight it'll be kind of close, but Chicago's sitting in a nice spot here, I think, with both Luka and LeBron, by the way.
Very good. All right, so now let's talk about Braxton's first round exit. So this is Braxton is the number 2 overall seed, taking on our friend Kobe Colossus Road, who was the 15 overall seed. So this matchup currently, this one actually is 4-4-1 as it stands at the moment. So actually kind of a tight race. I know like category wise it's tight. They are currently tied in blocks. Colossus has a 2 steal lead. Turnovers are only separated by 1 turnover. And then some of the other categories are a little bit further apart. So let's, this is a tough one because it's always tough when you see some specific categories start to pull away. Like, okay, he's for sure going to win this side. They're for sure going to win that side. But when it's really going to look like it's coming down to both stocks, so steals and blocks, as well as turnovers. So Brax, just to keep you happy, I'm going to stick on the side that you are a first round exit. So we'll see how that matchup plays out. And honestly, I literally just now noticed that you and I are within the same bracket column. So if you and I both win our matchups, we would have to play each other. And I'm pretty sure it's that same way in Bubble, our other Dynasty League too, unfortunately. I don't know why you and I keep playing each other in Dynasty. Keep having to take each other. I don't know why that keeps happening to us, but it has been. But so that'll be my guess for you to appease you is first round exit for you. Congrats to Colossus Rhodes.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Let's move on now. This is going to be my current matchup. So I am the number 7 overall seed. That's my team, Real Madrid Baloncesto. I am taking on the number 10 overall seed, the Dallas Mavericks. So one thing, I don't know if I've mentioned it on this channel before, but I do have constant problems for some reason with being able to field a viable center. So I kind of came in seeding wise a lot lower than I really expected to be, because that, just dealing with that kind of constant problem so far, like throughout the regular season, definitely affected where I was able to land, just because that center slot was constantly open for me with, someone like Derek Lively going down, Bobby Portis being injured. Right now, Dallas, who I do believe has a very good team, is beating me 6-3. Let's go to you, Adrian. How do you think this one might play out? And don't worry, you will not hurt my feelings.
Well, you touched on the Portis suspension. I think that one was extremely unfortunate for you, especially you noting that you are in need of a center. So my sincere condolences to you on that one. I
Yeah,
had to deal with that in a couple other leagues.
calling it an injury kind of, I think, overshadows the character issues you've got on your team, Andrew. I don't,
Got a
I
bunch of cheaters who take extremely weak painkillers, apparently.
yeah.
But looking at the Mavericks roster, I mean, you said it, Andrew. He's got a really good roster. I think pretty good top talent and some decent depth as well. I mean, you got Lillard, Abdia, Bridges, Brook Lopez, Klay Thompson. So I think if they stay healthy, I think they have a good chance of holding on to the lead that they've got over your team. It's hard to go against a team that's got a duo of SGA and Harden, especially because they just match so well together. But if I'm not mistaken, I think when I was looking at your team, you don't have much cap space to play with, even though you could potentially have like an open roster spot. So I think that sort of lack of depth may come back to bite you and allow the Mavericks to see through to the second round.
Fair enough. Yeah, the salary's been an issue because there has been some good guys on the waiver wire that I would like to use. But I have really not had much room for any of them. And luckily, been able to use like Lonnie Walker, who within our system is on a really cheap contract right now. But it's been up and down. So we'll see how that one plays out. It looks like you and I might be first round exits, Prax. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here. This is our miracle story, the Kanazawa Samurais. I think maybe a video or two ago when we were talking about this league and some of the trades Kanazawa made, he was in like 20th place, 22nd place, like throughout the season. He was doing pretty bad. But he made some trades at the end of the season that really gave him a lot of depth, like trading away Karl Anthony Towns for Mark Williams, Stephon Castle. He got Bradley Beal out of that deal too. So he really turned a lot of different guys into productive depth for himself. Managed to beat me in the final week of the season pretty soundly, which is what landed him in the 14th overall seed. So he is currently playing, shout out to Lambert, by the way, the owner of Kanazawa. He is currently playing our friend Gabe, the owner of the Mexico City Capitanes, who is the number 3 overall seed. Right now, in that matchup, it looks like Mexico City is up 7-1-1. So if Mexico City pulls up another category, he's going to be up 8-1. So on the surface level, it does look like there is a complete ass kicking taking place. However, if you look at the categories, it is a bit closer than it seems. Braxton, let's go to you on this one. How do you think this playoff matchup might play out?
Thanks for coming to me because I wanted to talk about this, and we overlooked it a little bit in our trade portion here. But another trade he made was that I thought was huge for him being able to kind of claw his way into the playoffs here. He traded Mark Williams for Alex Sarr and Miles McBride in like a 3 or 4 team deal that I was involved in. And I think that was huge for his depth. In my discussions with him, he had talked about how he wanted to remain competitive because he didn't have his first round pick. And, even if he does lose in the first round here, I think it was huge for him to accomplish that goal of getting into the playoffs with some of the stuff he's been dealing with Scotty Barnes this year, with Bradley Beal this year, having major injuries. And with that being said, I don't know if he's going to be able to pull out of this hole here against I think Mexico City is one of the better teams in this, especially now that the top team has lost Wemby. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr. did just go down. He's week to week, and he did miss a game from Walker Kessler, and he's got a lot of value stocked up in Lauri Markkanen as well, right? So we can't really count on these Jazz guys to be a huge factor during the playoffs. I mean, they've shown, Will Hardy has already shown that they'll sit anybody any night, right? So if there is a comeback to be had, it's going to be as a result of those guys not contributing at all. Now, I will also mention that, Kanazawa is a couple big games away from being right in it, right? He's going to need some big performances from guys like OG, from somebody like Nasri, who has been playing exceptional this season, and he might need a big performance from Alex Sarr. Bradley Beal might be done for the week. He just re-aggravated his injury, but he really needs to ride some of his best players here to have a chance at coming back.
I agree. That's there is, the Cinderella story for Kanazawa can absolutely continue, but he's just going to need a little bit more magic to get there because Mexico City is really freaking good. All right, now let's go to our last matchup that's taking place. This is number 6 overall Singapore Slingers. Shout out to Joy. Going up against the number 11 overall Syracuse Nationals. Shout out to Sunny. So this one is close. This is a current 5-4 lead for Syracuse. Looking into the categories, though, it is close. I mean, some of the categories can look deceiving at this time, but that's just because here in the West Coast, a lot of these 7:30 games haven't started yet. Like, for example, the OKC game has not started yet. The Clippers game has not started yet. There's a good amount of games that have not started yet. So with this matchup, he still has, Singapore still has J-Dub to play, Brandon Clark, Isaiah Hartenstein. On the other side, Scottie Pippen, Desmond Bain still has to play. But it looks like Syracuse is dealing with a couple of injuries right now, too. So this is a very interesting matchup to see play out. I think these kind of middle seed matchups, like, 8 versus 9, 7 versus 10, 6 versus 11, are always a lot of fun. So let's go to you, Adrian. How do you think this matchup might play out?
Yeah, this I agree. You kind of called on it, Andrew. Is probably one of the most tightly contested matchups for the entire week. And Nationals, while they're slightly ahead, you call them their injuries: Maxey, John Collins, Dosunmu as well. Slingers, I think they're just missing Sexton, so a little bit healthier on that side. So you mentioned a lot of the games, even for just tonight, have not started yet, including some of the Slingers' best players and Hartenstein, J-Dub. So I think just with the depth that the Slingers have and some of that top talent on the national side not being available for at least part of the week, is just over the course of the week. I think we'll find that Joy will end up on top. Probably not by much, but I think he'll hold on.
Very good. Yeah, this is a close one. Do you have any thoughts on this one, Brax? I guess I'll ask you too, since it is pretty close.
I really like something I will highlight, and we've talked about this previously, is that Singapore went into the season as a tanking team. He got Jimmy Butler, I think, like 300th or something in the inaugural draft, and kind of pivoted that into being a competitive team. And what seeding did he finish at, Andrew? Let me see here.
6.
He finished 6th after starting the season, or going into the season rather, as a tanking team. So I think he did a really nice job at pivoting off that. Jalen Williams having an exceptional year definitely played a huge part in that. But I really like what he's done with his team, and I think it'll be a really close matchup.
So as we kind of just have an overview of how these playoffs are, how the regular season stats ended, the seeding of where everybody ended. I'll go to you first, Adrian. Do you have a particular team who you really like their odds so far? Maybe they're healthy and have a good-looking playoff schedule moving forward, or is there maybe like 2 to 3 teams you think have a pretty good chance of getting into the final and winning it?
There's only one key one for me that comes to mind, but I will say they are currently losing, somewhat decently, and that's the Beijing Ducks. Just again, looking at a team of Jokic, I love Dyson Daniels, Cat as well, amongst some other good players there. Potentially doesn't quite have the depth to make it all the way, but when you've got some of those guys, if they've got a week where you're 4-game slate, I think it's very hard to get past them. So. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ducks were to make it pretty far. Outside of them, just going through each of the matchups, you can see really just, I think, the parity across the league. Like, everything is very close when you consider that, some of the top teams are dealing with some major injuries. It really has leveled out the playing field to where it just shows you that come playoff time, anything can happen. You can have a phenomenal season and, crush everyone 7-2 all year long, and then get a couple of injuries or one bad week and you're out of it. So there's no real clear teams for me that show up as like strong front runners. I'll call on the Ducks just because I really like some of their top talent, but their lack of depth could come back to bite them.
And I think what's tough about this Ducks first round matchup, we're looking at Case's team now, the Las Vegas Aces. This is one I actually plan to bring up as kind of just one of my favorites, not so much due to like specific star power or anything like that, but it's because he's deep. And knock on wood, that's for you, Case, he's healthy too. So like Keyshawn George is playing a huge role for Washington right now. Smart's actually playing a little bit too for them. DeAndre Hunter's awesome. Jared Allen, Jaylen Brown, and Şengün is definitely his big three. Case masterfully waited a few rounds for people to skip over Jaylen Brown because they didn't want to touch his contract, and was able to grab both Şengün and Jared Allen first. And then I think he made a couple more picks in between that and still got Jaylen Brown after that too. So masterful drafting on his part. I know he made some trades, which eventually got him Jabari Smith. So just that depth of these Rocket guys, Eason and Smith and Şengün. He also's got Mitchell Robinson, Jaylen Brown, Jared Allen. So the specific punt he's going for is very evident. And all of his guys, he's got healthy bodies right now, guys that are on playoff teams, and then guys who are getting all the silly season minutes they can handle in Keyshawn George. So I think one of my favorites and easily my favorite sleeper is definitely Las Vegas going into this playoffs. But let's go over to you, Brax. Any particular favorites you have for heading into, maybe the final round?
Yeah, Andrew, I think you're a shoo-in for the whole thing. I think you're going to cakewalk through round 1, round 2,
Damn it!
round 3, and take the whole thing. Actually, though, I do like the combo of SGA, James Harden, and Davion Mitchell is playing a huge role right now. He's really, I don't think anybody would have saw this coming for Davion Mitchell, even if he stayed on in Toronto. He's playing better than he did on a worse team, which is he's on a better team now, playing better than he did, I should say, on a worse team, which is really awesome. And if Cameron Johnson wants to continue to play, and the Nets decide they want to keep some of their guys who are over the age of 25 in the lineup, I think you've got a nice squad here. Obviously, center, like you said, is kind of a big issue for you, as Kevon Looney's kind of locked in there. But some matchup luck and some big games from your better players, I think you got a decent shot.
Yeah, at the least, I don't have any 2-game weeks from Harden or SGA throughout the entirety of the playoffs. So it's really just coming down to the availability and just overall support that the rest, the supporting cast of the team's going to put in. Because obviously, it would be great to have. Number one, Bobby Portis in general is really big for my build, but of course having Derek Lively back in action too would be huge. I would not have Kevon Looney if it weren't for those two going down. I would probably still have Nickeil Alexander-Walker instead. So there's some of those trades that you just got to make out of necessity in order to get yourself to go farther. Because at one point I was up in 3rd place. After some, losing a couple of those centers, drifted me down to more, outside of the top 5, which is where I ended up. But, like we mentioned earlier, that race was really close. Like the 5th place was 4 games better than where I and Singapore ended up at. So very, very tight league overall. Very good parity in general. This is what a healthy dynasty league should look like. So that's how things are looking for us in round 1 of the Angle Dynasty League playoffs. We will likely revisit again either in round 2 or round 3 prior to the finals. And then we'll do an additional video once the finals have taken place to discuss the winner. And I'm planning a special video that I'm going to make featuring highlights of the winning team's players too. So that will do it for us today. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us, dude. It's great to have you on. I look forward to having you on again, man.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks, Brax.
All right, very good. So if you want to check out any of our content, head over to anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com, and we'll see you guys next time.